August 1996. Princess Diana wrote a letter to Queen Elizabeth that started, "Your Majesty, I can no longer remain silent about what your son has done." What she revealed in the next 8 pages made the Queen call an emergency family meeting within 24 hours. For the first time in history, Charles was summoned to explain himself directly to his mother, and what Diana's letter contained was so damning, he had no defense. The morning of August 15, 1996, Diana sat at her writing desk at Kensington Palace, watching early morning joggers pass outside. She had barely slept for 3 nights, drafting and redrafting the same letter, the one she'd been too afraid to write for 4 years. On her desk lay 7 previous attempts, each crossed out and abandoned. This letter had to be perfect. Not because Diana cared about perfect grammar or royal protocol, but because this would be her only chance to tell Queen Elizabeth the complete, unfiltered truth about her marriage to Charles. Diana picked up her fountain pen, ironically a wedding gift from Charles, and began writing on cream-colored stationery embossed with her personal crest. "Your Majesty," she wrote, her hand steady despite her racing heart, "I can no longer remain silent about what your son has done to me, to our children, and to the institution you have dedicated your life to protecting." The first page detailed how Charles told her 3 days before their wedding that he didn't love her, but the wedding had to proceed because everything was already arranged. Diana wrote about standing in that room at Buckingham Palace, 20 years old, realizing she was marrying a man who loved Camilla. Page 2 described the honeymoon, Charles wearing Camilla's gift cufflinks, spending hours on calls with her while Diana sat alone, telling Diana she was too emotional, too needy. She wrote about returning pregnant with William, knowing her marriage was a sham. Page 3 described the eating disorder that developed from stress and isolation. The palace's response wasn't concern, it was annoyance. "They told me I was embarrassing them," Diana wrote, "that I needed to pull myself together and stop being so dramatic. No one asked why I was struggling. They just wanted me to hide it better." She wrote about being pregnant with Harry while Charles openly resumed his relationship with Camilla. About palace staff being instructed to lie about Charles's whereabouts. About being told she was paranoid when she suspected the truth, then discovering she'd been right all along. Page 4 detailed something the Queen had never been told, how Diana had been systematically isolated from anyone who might support her. "Every time I formed a friendship with a staff member who showed me genuine kindness, they were transferred or let go," Diana wrote. "Every time I confided in someone within the family, that information made its way back to Charles, who used it against me." Diana described being monitored, having phone conversations listened to, having mail screened. She wrote about trying to call a mental health helpline from a palace phone and having her call disconnected, then being reprimanded by palace officials for seeking outside help. "I was a prisoner," Diana wrote, "in the most famous house in England, surrounded by people and completely alone." Page 5 was where Diana's letter shifted to documenting Charles's systematic deception. She had to be accurate, no exaggeration or emotional language that might be dismissed. She listed dates, times, and locations where Charles had met with Camilla while telling the palace he was attending to other business. Diana had kept meticulous records, cross-referencing Charles's official schedule with staff accounts, telephone records, and her own observations. January 15, 1993, she wrote, Charles told palace officials he was meeting with Heritage Organization representatives in Gloucestershire. He was actually at Camilla's home. I have statements from 2 staff members confirming this. She listed 17 such instances, each documented, each provable. 17 times Charles had lied to his mother about his activities. Page 6 addressed how palace officials had actively worked to undermine Diana while protecting Charles. She wrote about leaked stories to the press, about private conversations appearing in newspapers, about palace sources painting her as unstable while portraying Charles as the patient, suffering husband. "The narrative being fed to you, ma'am," Diana wrote, "is that I am a difficult, emotionally unstable woman. I spent 4 years wondering if this was true, but I recently obtained evidence proving this narrative was deliberately constructed to justify Charles's behavior and discredit anything I might say." Diana included details about 3 palace officials who'd been feeding negative stories about her to journalists. She had phone records, meeting logs, and statements from journalists confirming the coordinated campaign. Page 7 revealed that Charles had been using palace resources to support his relationship with Camilla. Security details facilitated his meetings with her. Palace cars transported her. Staff time was dedicated to managing his affair, while Diana was told there were budget constraints on her own office. "I am asking you, ma'am," Diana wrote, How the Prince of Wales can use Crown resources to support a relationship that undermines the institution of marriage. How can palace officials facilitate this while telling me I must be more discreet? But page 8 was most explosive. Diana wrote about the impact on William and Harry. She described how the boys had begun asking questions about why their parents lived separately, why Daddy spent so much time with that lady. William asked me last week, Diana wrote, "Mum, does Dad love Mrs. Parker Bowles more than he loves you?" He's 14 years old. Ma'am. He shouldn't have to ask that question. But he's not stupid, and neither is Harry. They see everything. They hear the whispers. They read the newspapers. Diana wrote about William coming to her room asking if the divorce was his fault, about Harry becoming withdrawn and angry at school, about both boys struggling with their parents' very public dissolution while being told to maintain proper royal appearances. "These are your grandsons," Diana wrote. "They deserve better. They deserve a family that tells them the truth. Instead, they're being taught that appearance matters more than reality, that lies are acceptable for the good of the institution, and that their mother's pain is less important than their father's comfort." The final section was Diana's ultimatum. Not a threat, but a clear statement of what would happen if things didn't change. "I am writing to you because I believe you were not fully informed about what has been happening. I believe you were given a version of events that protected Charles and blamed me. I have kept quiet for years out of respect for you and the institution, but I can no longer do so while watching my son suffer. I am giving you this information directly, privately, and first. I am trusting you will use it to protect William and Harry and ensure Charles is held accountable. If these changes do not occur, I will have no choice but to tell my story publicly, not out of vindictiveness, but necessity, because the truth must be told, and if the palace won't tell it, I will." Diana signed the letter simply, Diana. Not any formal closing royal protocol demanded, just her name. She sealed the envelope with red wax and marked it "Private and confidential for Her Majesty's eyes only." At 10:30 a.m., Diana's private secretary, Eleanor Cartwright, arrived. Diana handed her the sealed envelope. "Eleanor, this needs to be delivered directly to the Queen, not through palace channels, directly to her." Eleanor looked at the envelope, recognizing its weight. "Your Royal Highness, palace protocol requires—" "I don't care about protocol," Diana said quietly. "This contains information the Queen needs to see without it being filtered or interpreted by anyone else. Can you ensure that happens?" Eleanor had worked for Diana for 3 years. She'd witnessed the unfair treatment, the double standards, the systematic undermining. She nodded. "I'll deliver it personally to Her Majesty's senior dresser, Angela Kelly." "Thank you," Diana said. "After you deliver this, you might want to update your resume. Things are about to get very uncomfortable for people associated with me." Eleanor smiled slightly. "I knew what I was signing up for, ma'am. I'm not going anywhere." The letter reached Buckingham Palace at 11:45 a.m. Angela Kelly delivered it during the Queen's private lunch in her personal sitting room. "A letter from the Princess of Wales, ma'am," Angela said, "marked private and confidential, delivered with instructions that it reach you without going through normal channels." The Queen looked surprised. Diana rarely wrote letters. A personal letter bypassing normal protocol was unprecedented. "Thank you, Angela. That will be all." The Queen opened the letter and began reading. Her expression shifted as she progressed through the pages. By page 3, she'd stopped eating. By page 5, she'd walked to the window, letter in hand. By page 8, she'd returned to her desk and picked up her private telephone. "I need Prince Charles here immediately," she told her private secretary, Robert Fellows. "Cancel everything. I want him here within 2 hours." Robert had never heard that tone in the Queen's voice in 30 years of service. "Yes, ma'am. May I tell him the nature of the meeting?" "Tell him his mother needs to speak with him urgently about family matters. That's all." The Queen read through Diana's letter again, making notes in the margins, questions to ask, details to verify, items needing immediate investigation. She'd been aware of the marriage difficulties, but the Queen had been assured it was mutual, that both parties bore responsibility, that Diana's emotional instability had made the marriage unworkable. This letter painted a completely different picture, and the specific details Diana provided, dates, times, names, locations, could all be verified. Charles arrived at 2:15 p.m., visibly irritated at having his schedule disrupted. He was shown into the Queen's private sitting room. Not a formal reception room, but her personal space. The first sign this wasn't normal. The Queen stood by the window, Diana's letter in hand. She didn't turn when Charles entered. "Mother, what's this about? I had an important meeting. Did you tell Diana 3 days before your wedding that you didn't love her?" the Queen asked, still not turning. Charles froze. The room was silent except for an antique clock ticking. Mother, that's not... The situation was complicated. Yes or no, Charles? Did you tell your fiancée 3 days before marrying her in Westminster Abbey in front of 2 billion people that you didn't love her? I told her I valued and respected her, and that we could build a successful partnership. That's not what I asked. The Queen turned and Charles stepped back at her expression. I asked if you told her you didn't love her. Charles looked down. The marriage had to proceed. Everything was arranged. Canceling would have been... So you did tell her. The Queen picked up the letter. Diana has written me a rather detailed account of your marriage. 8 pages. Would you like to read it, or shall I summarize? Mother, whatever Diana told you... January 15th, 1993, the Queen interrupted. You told palace officials you were meeting heritage representatives in Gloucestershire. Where were you actually? Charles's face went pale. I don't recall. April 3, 1993. You told me personally you were at Highgrove reviewing estate management. Where were you? Mother, I don't understand. 17 instances, the Queen continued coldly. 17 times Diana claims you lied about your whereabouts to meet Camilla Parker Bowles. 17 times with dates, times, locations, and staff witnesses. She set the letter down. You have lied to your sovereign. You have used Crown resources to facilitate an extramarital affair. You have allowed palace officials to wage a campaign against your wife to cover your behavior. And most unforgivably, you've put your sons in an impossible position. That's not fair, Charles protested. Diana is exaggerating. Is she? The Queen picked up her phone. Robert, bring me Prince Charles's official schedule for January 15th, 1993, and the security log showing his actual movements. Yes, I'll wait. 3 minutes later, Robert entered with the documents. The Queen read them, then looked at Charles. Your schedule shows heritage meetings in Gloucestershire. The security log shows you at Bolhide Manor, Camilla's residence from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Explain this discrepancy. Charles said nothing. I have been lied to, the Queen said quietly, by my own son, to cover an affair that has humiliated his wife, damaged his children, and brought shame to this family. When Diana tried to tell people, she was labeled unstable by people in my own household, helping you hide the truth. She sat down, looking older and more tired than Charles had ever seen. I have dedicated my life to this institution. I have sacrificed personal happiness for duty. I raised you to do the same. Instead, you have lied, cheated, and allowed an innocent young woman to be destroyed to protect your secrets. Mother, I am not finished. The Queen's voice was steel. You will call Diana today and apologize. A real apology acknowledging what you've put her through. You will cease all contact with Camilla until your divorce is finalized. You will cooperate with fair settlement negotiations, and you will not allow palace officials to continue undermining Diana. You can't expect me to. I can, and I do. Because if you don't, Diana will tell her story publicly, and she has documentation. How will the country react when they learn their future king lied to his mother, used Crown resources for his affair, and orchestrated a campaign to destroy his wife? Charles was speechless. You're dismissed. And Charles? I am profoundly disappointed. Not because your marriage failed, but because of the lies, the cowardice, and the cruelty. After Charles left, the Queen sat alone with Diana's letter. Then she called her secretary. I need to speak with Princess Diana. Arrange a private meeting for tomorrow morning. Clear my entire schedule. This will take time. The next morning, Diana arrived at 10 a.m., heart-pounding. She'd expected anger or dismissal, not a private invitation the very next day. The Queen gestured for Diana to sit. I read your letter. I spent yesterday verifying the details. Everything I could check was accurate. Diana felt tears threatening. Ma'am, I owe you an apology, the Queen continued. I was not properly informed about your marriage. I was given information designed to protect my son and blame you. I accepted it without investigation because it was easier to believe you were the problem than confront the truth about Charles's behavior. Diana couldn't speak. She'd never imagined hearing this from the Queen. I have spoken with Charles. He has been instructed to cooperate with fair divorce negotiations. I've also initiated an investigation into how palace officials handled information about your marriage. Several people will be held accountable. Thank you, Diana managed. Don't thank me, the Queen replied. I should have done this years ago. I should have asked questions, investigated, protected you as I would have wanted someone to protect my own daughter. I failed you, and I failed William and Harry. I'm sorry. They sat in silence. Then Diana spoke quietly. Ma'am, I don't want to destroy Charles or damage the monarchy. I just want the truth acknowledged and my sons protected. I understand, the Queen said, and I will do everything to ensure that happens. But, Diana, the institution depends on public trust. What happened in your marriage, if it became public, could seriously damage that trust. I'm not asking you to lie. I'm asking you to consider how much detail the public needs to know. Diana thought carefully. I don't need to tell the public everything, but I do need them to know I wasn't the problem everyone tried to make me out to be. I need my sons to know their mother fought for the truth. That's fair, the Queen acknowledged, and I will ensure that happens, within reason. As Diana left that morning, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Vindicated. The Queen knew the truth. Charles had been held accountable, and most importantly, her sons would grow up knowing their mother hadn't been the unstable, difficult person the palace had tried to paint. 3 weeks later, new divorce settlement terms were presented, far more favorable than the original proposal. Palace officials who'd undermined her were quietly reassigned or retired. The coordinated campaign of negative stories suddenly stopped. Years later, after Diana's death, people close to the royal family revealed that the Queen's relationship with Charles never fully recovered. She'd learned her son was capable of sustained deception, of using his position to facilitate an affair while destroying an innocent woman's reputation. The Queen kept Diana's letter in a private safe at Buckingham Palace. It was never made public, never referenced officially, never acknowledged to exist, but its impact was undeniable. It changed how the Queen viewed her son. It changed divorce, negotiations. It changed how palace officials treated Diana in her final year. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a public accusation or media interview. Sometimes it's a private letter, carefully written, thoroughly documented, delivered to the one person with power to demand accountability. Diana's letter was never meant to be public. It was meant to tell the truth to someone who needed to hear it, but had been prevented from doing so. And in that goal, it succeeded completely.